How would you react if your child was born black, but both you and your wife were white? I'm not kidding. I was in the delivery room, my heart pounding like mad, when the doctor laid my newborn son on my chest. I stared, dumbfounded. He was black. I'm white, and so is my wife. Nothing in our past ever hinted at a possibility like this, yet there he was, staring up with eyes that didn't match our skin tone at all. The room went dead silent. No one said a word for a long minute. The nurse kept her eyes down, and the doctor mumbled something about running a DNA test as he excused himself. My wife and I exchanged looks that said more than words ever could. I had seen something off in her eyes before, a nervous flicker when she laughed and brushed off small questions about our future, but I never expected this. After the doctor left, she reached for my hand and, with a trembling voice, said, "I need to tell you something." That was it. Nothing else. Just that one sentence that immediately made every second count. Later that evening, after the hospital corridors cleared and the adrenaline subsided, I sat her down. I kept my tone flat, wanting to know the truth without any fluff. "Who's the father?" I asked bluntly. She stared at me, and for a moment it felt like time had stopped. She admitted that months ago she had been seeing someone else behind my back. It wasn't a one-night thing. It was an ongoing affair. I listened, numb, as she explained that she'd been meeting him quietly, assuring herself it was just a mistake, just a fling that she planned to end. But there was more. It turned out her secret lover wasn't some random guy from a bar. He was my best friend, someone I'd trusted with my life. I'd known him since we were kids, and he'd always been like a brother to me. I remember how we'd hung out after work, shared our wins and losses over beers, and planned for our futures together. But now, everything I believed in was crumbling right before my eyes. The DNA test that the doctor had ordered was coming in soon, and I knew deep down it wouldn't match mine. The next few days were a blur of cold hospital rooms, tense phone calls, and confrontations that I never imagined I'd have to face. I waited for the test results in a sterile waiting room, each minute stretching on like an eternity. My mind raced with questions. When did this start? How long had they been sneaking around behind my back? What was I supposed to do now? I wasn't one for dramatic soliloquies. I just needed the cold, hard truth. When the results finally came through, they confirmed my worst fears. The baby's DNA wasn't mine. It matched the blood type and markers of my best friend, the same friend I'd shared countless secrets with. I felt a surge of betrayal so raw that it left me speechless. I left the hospital without a word, driving straight home with a storm of thoughts. I wasn't angry just yet. I was confused and hurt, trying to stitch together a reality that made no sense. That night, I confronted both of them together. I walked into our living room where my wife was nervously pacing, and there he was too, lounging on the couch, as if nothing had happened. I didn't raise my voice. I laid it all out on the table. "I know what's going on," I said, keeping it factual. "The tests are in. You know exactly whose genes are in that baby." The silence that followed was suffocating. My best friend shifted uncomfortably, and my wife's eyes were fixed on the floor. She started to explain, her voice low. She claimed it was a mistake, a result of some bizarre hospital error or mix-up. But I knew errors like that were rare, and the facts didn't add up. I pressed her for the truth. Every word was calculated, every detail mattering. I asked how long it had been going on, if I had ever seen any proof, any message or call from him that pointed to this affair. She kept dodging, throwing vague references to stress, bad decisions, and things that just happened. Meanwhile, my best friend couldn't meet my eyes. The confrontation escalated quickly. My voice got rougher as I demanded answers, and the tension in the room became almost tangible. I recounted every small sign I'd noticed over the past few months. A missed call here, a hushed conversation there, the nervous twitch when the topic of family came up. I laid it all out without any embellishment. It wasn't about the shock of a black baby. It was about betrayal. A betrayal from two people I trusted most. I decided then that there would be no more hiding. I had to know the whole story. Over the next few days, I set up a plan to catch them in the act of explaining further. I installed a small camera in our living room where they often sat together, and I listened to every conversation when I was out. What I recorded wasn't a confession or an apology. It was a series of discussions about money, inheritance, and a future plan that involved them leaving town. The recordings showed my wife negotiating with my best friend about splitting everything. They spoke about a future without me, about covering up what had happened before anyone else found out. The rawness of their voices, the casual way they discussed life-altering decisions, made it all feel unreal. I had been blindsided not just by the affair, but by a scheme that went deeper than I could have imagined. The fact that they were planning to disappear with the baby and all our savings made me realize that this wasn't just about passion. It was cold, calculated manipulation. They'd seen me as someone to be used, a mark to be taken advantage of, while they plotted a life without any of the consequences. I confronted them again, this time with evidence in hand. I played the recordings, one by one, letting every word sink in. I demanded that they come clean. The argument that ensued was raw and unfiltered. My best friend tried to justify everything by saying that I had been too busy, too absorbed in my own life to notice the cracks. He claimed that the connection with my wife had developed slowly, that it was natural for people to drift apart when money and ambition were involved. My wife, on the other hand, just kept repeating that it was all a mistake, that she never intended for things to go this far. The tension hit a breaking point when I realized that neither of them cared about the mess they were creating. They only cared about what they could get out of it. In a fit of rage, I grabbed the recordings and shoved them onto the coffee table. I told them, plainly and without any theatrics, that I would be taking legal action and making sure that every single detail came to light. I wasn't interested in endless debates or trying to salvage our past. I just wanted the truth and my due respect, even if that meant turning my back on everything I once held dear. The confrontation ended with my wife storming out of the house, and my best friend not even bothering to look me in the eye as he left. I sat alone in the silence of our once shared home, grappling with the undeniable truth. Every minute of that day, every recorded conversation, was a slap in the face. I didn't feel like I needed to shout or cry. I just needed to process the cold, hard facts of what had happened. Days later, I received a call from a lawyer I hadn't spoken to in years. A lawyer who'd once been my friend, but now represented a party that wanted to settle things quietly. The lawyer explained that my wife and my best friend had signed a document years ago that allowed for certain financial arrangements in the event of unexpected situations. It turned out that they had planned this long before the baby was born, an insurance policy of sorts that I had been completely unaware of. The details were sparse, but it was enough to know that the betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was financial, and they'd been planning it for a long time. I couldn't believe how deeply this had all been orchestrated. The DNA results, the secret recordings, the pre-signed documents, it all pointed to a level of premeditation that made every previous moment of doubt in our relationship seem insignificant. I dug through old emails and text messages, re-examining every small detail for hints I'd missed. There was nothing obvious, just the usual chatter of everyday life. It was as if every conversation I had with them was a double entendre, every smile hiding a secret plan. One evening, as I sat reviewing the evidence with a sinking heart, I found a message on my wife's old phone. A message from my best friend that read, "We have everything sorted. Soon, he'll be out of the picture." I stared at it, the words etching themselves into my mind. The finality of it, the cold calculation behind it, made me realize that my entire life was a setup. I was the last obstacle in their well-laid plan. That message pushed me over the edge. I knew that if I didn't act fast, they would execute their plan without a trace, leaving me with nothing but questions and a broken life. I decided to confront the lawyer. I demanded every document, every signature, every detail of the arrangement that they had secretly put in place. Over the next few weeks, I pored over legal files, evidence, and every scrap of information I could gather. I wasn't looking for vindication or revenge. I just needed the unvarnished truth, a record of what had been done behind my back. In one of those long nights at my desk, I found a contract clause that I had never seen before. A clause that essentially allowed my wife and my best friend to claim full ownership of our shared assets if certain conditions were met. It detailed that, in the event of irreconcilable differences, the remaining party would forfeit all rights. I realized then that our entire marriage, everything I'd built with trust and commitment, was nothing more than a contingency plan for them. The realization was brutal. At this point, I wasn't even sure what I was fighting for anymore. Every conversation, every document, confirmed that my life was a series of calculated moves that I'd never seen coming. The shock of the black baby was just the beginning of a cascade of betrayals that left me questioning everything. I felt like I had been living a lie, the whole time oblivious to the truth that was right under my nose. I started to wonder if there was any way out of this mess. The more I looked, the more I found. Hidden bank accounts, secret meetings, even plans to move overseas as soon as the legal battle was over. It wasn't just about an affair, it was about taking over my life, my identity, my future. I became determined to fight back, not with anger or impulsive violence, but with facts, evidence, and a level-headed approach that I hoped would bring justice in the end. I reached out to a couple of old contacts who specialized in corporate law, and even some who had dealt with similar betrayal cases. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. Every meeting was a wake-up call, a reminder that I was standing up to two people who had not only betrayed me emotionally, but had also tried to swindle me out of everything. I compiled the recordings, the text messages, and every piece of documented evidence I could find. Each fact was laid out plainly, with no sugarcoating. One day, after a long series of meetings and phone calls, I received an invitation to meet with an independent mediator. I wasn't sure if this was a sign of compromise or another trick in their playbook. I showed up at a small nondescript office building and sat through a tense session where every fact of our messy situation was scrutinized. The mediator was blunt. There was no easy way to untangle the legal web they had spun. I was offered a settlement that, on paper, looked fair, but it was clear that my wife and my best friend had planned this long in advance. Accepting it would mean walking away with just a fraction of what I deserved, a way to keep the scandal quiet. I spent sleepless nights debating my options. On one hand, there was the desire to expose everything, to let the world know how deeply I'd been betrayed. On the other hand, I knew that any public exposure would destroy my life completely. My reputation, my relationships, my future. The decision wasn't just about money or legal rights. It was about reclaiming my dignity. I had to decide whether to fight tooth and nail in a messy public battle or take the settlement and try to rebuild what was left of my shattered life. I chose to fight. I couldn't accept a future built on someone else's lies. With every piece of evidence in hand, I went back to the mediator, demanding a reevaluation of the settlement. I laid out everything, the recordings, the documents, the text messages. I made it clear that I wasn't going to be pushed aside without a fight. The mediator warned me that this would mean a prolonged legal battle, but I was past caring about how long it would take. I just needed the truth to come out. The legal battle dragged on for months. Every day, I faced new revelations. In a hearing, it came to light that my best friend had been secretly channeling money into an offshore account, money that was supposed to be ours. In another session, it was revealed that my wife had changed her story several times, each version more contradictory than the last. The courtroom became a battleground of facts, with each side trying to outdo the other in the sheer weight of evidence. I stuck to my story, sticking to the facts and refusing to let any emotion sway my determination. As the trial neared its conclusion, one final twist surfaced that none of us expected. An anonymous source came forward with a set of documents that completely upended the narrative. The documents suggested that my best friend and wife had been involved in a previous scheme, one that involved several other people in a multi-million-dollar fraud that had been ongoing for years. It wasn't just about our marriage and our assets. It was a part of a larger network of deceit. The revelation hit me hard, but it also provided the leverage I needed. I used this new evidence to negotiate a final settlement that not only returned what was rightfully mine, but also exposed the wider scheme for what it was. In the final courtroom showdown, as the judge read out the verdict, I felt an odd mix of relief and sorrow. I had won back my life, but it came at a cost. The betrayal had cut deep, and nothing could ever bring back the trust I once had in the people I loved. As I walked out of the courthouse, I knew that this was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. I had learned a brutal lesson about trust, love, and the lengths some people will go to manipulate others for their own gain. The whole experience left me with scars, both seen and unseen. But it also taught me the value of truth. I learned that facts, no matter how painful, are the only things you can rely on when everything else crumbles. I rebuilt my life piece by piece, holding on to the hard-earned knowledge that betrayal may come in many forms, but truth always has a way of emerging. The resolution wasn't a neat, happy ending. It was messy, raw, and real. Now, months later, as I sit here writing this, I'm still processing everything. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive my wife or my best friend, but I do know one thing. I'm not the same person I was that day in the delivery room. I've been through hell and back, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that life doesn't wait for you to catch up. It just moves on, and you have to decide whether you're going to stand up and fight or let it pass you by. This story isn't just about a shocking birth or an unexpected twist of fate. It's about the relentless pursuit of truth, the importance of standing up for yourself when everyone else is busy plotting behind your back, and the realization that sometimes the facts are the only things that can set you free. In the end, I got my due, and justice was served, not by some grand act of revenge, but by a slow, methodical unveiling of the truth. My wife and my best friend faced the consequences of their actions, and I was finally able to reclaim what was mine: my life, my dignity, and my future. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was real, and it was mine. And that's how I went from a moment of shock in a hospital room to a battle for truth that reshaped my entire world. Every step of the way was marked by betrayal, unexpected twists, and a relentless drive to uncover every single fact, no matter how painful. Now, as I move forward, I know one thing for sure. When you're dealt a hand you never asked for, the only thing left to do is to play it your way, no matter what.